Let me read to you a passage from the second chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 18 to 22. It's the Gospel for Monday of the second week in Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, "Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. Some people came and asked Jesus, 'How is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours are not?' Jesus answered, 'How can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is still with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and on that day they will fast. No one sews a patch of cloth that has not shrunk on an old garment. If he does, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, he pours new wine into new wineskins." That's from Mark chapter 2, verses 18 to 22. What does it suggest to us? Well, it suggests something very new. What do I mean? Well, one of the several key elements of the Jewish religion that gave it notoriety among the peoples was its observance of the Sabbath. It was a constant cause of conflict between our Lord and several of the religious leaders that he did not observe many of the practices of the Sabbath which they had stipulated. And thus he was attacked for healing on the Sabbath and for permitting his disciples to pick ears of corn on the Sabbath in order to satisfy their hunger. That was the Sabbath. But another notable feature of the Jewish religion was fasting. It was a mark of religious earnestness among the Jews that they fasted. And in fact, the Jewish religion was somewhat notorious among the pagans for its practice of fasting. Some pagan writers even thought that the Jews fasted on the Sabbath, which they did not. Fasting is referred to repeatedly in the Old Testament, and in fact, here in our passage, our Lord informs his interlocutors that his own disciples will fast. Our Gospel scene today opens with the author setting the context, which is that John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And so it is that some people came and asked Jesus, "How is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours are not?" It was plain to them that our Lord was a prophet, that he was filled with God and of eminent holiness, but to all appearances he was not notable in his fasting practices, as was, say, John, and he did not impose a regime of fasting on his disciples in the way John and the Pharisees did theirs. Indeed, in another passage of the Gospels, our Lord contrasts himself with John. John came neither eating nor drinking, whereas the Son of Man did come eating and drinking. The leaders called John a man possessed, our Lord says, while him they called a drunkard and a glutton. So, some of the people were puzzled. They could not understand what was going on. They could not fit it together. What did the religion of Jesus amount to? Our Lord calmly and sovereignly, and we may imagine with a smile, explained to the sons of Abraham that there was something altogether new here. It could not be the business of religion as usual. A new start was being made, and later they would fast. It was a new start indeed. As we heard our Lord say, "No one sews a patch of cloth that has not shrunk on an old garment. If he does, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, he pours new wine into new wineskins." Jesus was the new piece, the new garment of revealed religion which would clothe the peoples. He was the new wine from which all would be invited to drink. God had revealed himself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob long before, and these patriarchs had faithfully handed on the revelation. He revealed himself to Moses and the prophets, and these had handed on the divine revelation. The chosen people knew that they were called to hear and to live by that word of the living God, the God who was the bridegroom of the people. But in our passage today, our Lord calmly and almost casually indicates that the bridegroom had now arrived. A new relationship with his people was about to be established, and the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham was about to be seen. As we heard, how is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours are not? They asked. Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is still with them? They cannot. They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and on that day they will fast. At this point, with the bridegroom now among them, it could not be business as usual in things religious. His disciples must come to know him, to learn from him, to base their lives on him. Revealed religion was a new thing now. It was the love and worship and service of him. He was not just a master instructing his disciples, as were John and the leading Pharisees. He was the object of their friendship, their worship, and their service. He was the very bridegroom. This had to be learned and placed at the heart of religion. And then, when the time came for him to be taken away, they would fast. That is to say, if we wish to be a disciple of Christ, first things must come first. St. Paul would write that all the fasting in the world would be useless if it had not love. The first love in our life is our love for Christ. This is what must be learned first and above all. Jesus Christ is the center and focus of the Christian religion. He is not just our teacher, though he is most certainly our teacher. He is our Lord and our God. Our life is life in him, and his gift to us is a share in his own spirit, enabling us to live constantly the life of God, if we but set our hearts and minds to it. Let us then place Jesus Christ at the center of our lives, and never allow anything to take his place, and certainly never the very practice of religion to take his place.